Well, our next guest has made a name for herself in the ag industry by turning ugly fruit into a thriving business, which has led her to becoming the #1 grower of pumpkins in the U.S. Now she's sharing her story with a new book called The Growing Season. So author and founder of Frey Farms, Sarah Frey, joins us now to talk with us about this. And Sarah, it is so good to meet you and have you on the show. Give us some background on yourself and your time on the farm.
Hi, Tammy. Thanks for having me today. I'm based here in southern Illinois, still on the family farm that I grew up on. Very, very small family farm, only 80 acres. And we're headquartered about 20 minutes northeast of Mount Vernon, Illinois. But Frey Farms today looks very different than it looked when I grew up here. Today we farm in 7 different states. We grow an array of fresh fruits and vegetables, but we're best known as America's biggest pumpkin farm.
That is so interesting. I did not realize that. So tell us how that business was able to grow and expand.
It's one of the things I talk about in the book. I was the youngest of 5 children that grew up here on the farm. My 4 older brothers went off to college, and then, I was kind of the last kid left, and it was my dream to go move away and get off of the farm. But ultimately, I ended up purchasing the farm at a very early age, starting a fresh produce delivery route, and doing business with the nation's largest retailer, Walmart, when I was a teenager, and ultimately started diversifying the crops that we grew and the type of farming that we did. And then my 4 older brothers came home to join me in the business, and the rest is kind of history at that point. Outside of fruits and vegetables, we also make some great beverages, which are made out of all of the things that we grow and juiced right on the farm, like our Sama watermelon juice or our Sarah's homegrown agua frescas.
I was going to say, for our radio listeners, we've been seeing a lot of video of those gorgeous watermelons. Let's talk a little more about the book that you just released called The Growing Season. Give us some details about that and what readers can expect.
Sure. Well, the book is The Growing Season, How I Saved an American Farm and Built a New Life. It is not a business book. It's not a how-to book. It's just really, it's a memoir, really, and that's just sort of snapshots of my life that I write about, and growing up in rural poverty to, the challenges that I faced as a young woman starting my own business, and moving out at a very early age, and then what it took ultimately to build the foundation for a successful future.
Well, I can't wait to read it myself. I bet there's some really good nuggets of wisdom in there. And I heard that you recently spoke at the National Rural Educators Association conference about rural education. What's your message there?
Yes, I was up in Indy yesterday for their national forum, and I went to a very, very small rural school. There were only 60 kids in my grade school in the little village where I grew up called Orchardville, Illinois. And those teachers that taught in those rural schools, had such a big impact on my life and ultimately helped shape who I would later become. And so rural education is something that's very near and dear to my heart. And with COVID, so many of the children in rural parts of the country were left behind because they didn't have access to broadband internet. So when schools were closed down, many kids in rural communities all across our country were sent home with no access to e-learning. And that's one of the things that ultimately I think will be a positive development for rural communities out of the bill that got passed in Congress last week. There is some allocation for states to fund the expansion of rural broadband. And so I'm excited about that. But it was just really great to be up in Indianapolis with all of these rural educators who have taken an interest in our communities across the country and really have invested themselves in the youth in our rural schools.
Yeah, that is a great message there. That is author and founder of Frey Farms, Sarah Frey. Appreciate you joining us today, Sarah.